Now that my Cyclone Rake is working right, I decided I'm going to keep it, and first thing I'm going to do is make a lift to get the motor on and off of it. I had this old Harbor Freight trailer jack that I bought years ago laying around, and I decided that I'd start by using that. I also had a couple partial sheets of 10 gauge sheet metal and quarter-inch sheet metal and 14 gauge diamond plate. So looks like I'll be able to make this whole lift without buying anything. Now that blower assembly on my Z10 is really too heavy for a one-person lift. So I figured I'd better do something to help me get it on and off the machine before I hurt my back or pull something. So I started out by cutting some 10 gauge sheet metal, as you see here, to make a framework to weld onto the trailer jack. And then I also cut a couple of small brackets out of the 10 gauge that are going to just go on the motor mounting holes and allow me to lift by that, so I'm not putting any stress on any parts of that frame that comes on the Cyclone Rake. Like I said, this is just being made from scrap that I had laying around. And it's just an idea that you could adapt to possibly any scrap that you may have also. After cutting out the two sides of the frame, I just had to go in, and I've got one of the little press brakes in a 20-ton press that I decided to use for these two pieces to just allow me to bend them to a 45-degree angle on the end so I could weld it all together. Now, as you can see, this is just kind of a trial and error process to get to the right angle, so you may have to go back and just tweak it a couple times till you get it right. Here you can see pretty much the framework is all tack welded together, and then I'm just going to go back to the plasma table and cut out a piece of 14 gauge diamond plate to tack on that for kind of like a bottom base deck on it. And having that digital torch height controller on this, it really does help you get a good cut on the diamond plate and things that step in a odd shape. And next it's back to cutting some pieces out of some quarter-inch scrap to make some plates to reinforce the corners and to also allow me to mount a couple of threaded stem casters on the front of it. When using plasma for cutting out metal, I find out that I always, no matter how carefully I tweak the settings, I get some slag on the part. And I found the easiest way to remove that is just get an old wood chisel and just tap it a couple times and maybe scrape it across it, and everything comes out nice and clean. And here I'm getting ready to weld in those caster plates in the corners. Don't look at the weld because they're really they're functional, but they're not that pretty. And this is kind of the main frame that's welded together. And then I just went back and I took that piece of diamond plate and I tack welded it on from the bottom. Now these are those first couple of brackets that I cut that I'm going to be mounting on the bottom of the motor there to use as my lift points. I really didn't want to stress anything else on the frame, so I just kind of bolted them through the motor mounting bolts and whatnot. Then I went over and I had some old angle laying around that I had to start cutting up to make a framework to go on the lift to engage those motor mounting plates and to raise the motor. And next I had to cut some brackets to mount the lifting assembly to the jack. So I cut these brackets out, and at the same time I went over and I had to grind off the existing brackets that were on the trailer jack. One thing you have to do is grind any areas of galvanization off the jack before welding. Seeing how those trailer jacks swivel as you jack them up and down, I had to do something to kind of keep it from rotating. So what I did is I went back and I cut a plate out that I'm going to bend and mount on the base of the frame there to allow me to weld the tab onto the piece of the jack that moves up and down, and it's going to engage in a slot in this bracket that I'm cutting now, and that's going to keep the whole head assembly from turning. Then it's over this little Harbor Freight bender that I've got, and as you can see, I had to cut notches out of the piece because with 10 gauge steel, the maximum that you can bend on that thing is about 4 inches. And so what I had to do was just cut relief, so I only have 10 inches of metal to bend. So I bent one side, then I spun it around, and I bent the other side. Then it was a matter of going back to the frame assembly and just kind of locating a tab on the piece that moves up and down that you can see there, and then welding this bracket into place. And this is the finalized assembly here. Everything's welded together. It's got its first coat of primer on it, and it's getting ready to be painted. Now, I had a quart can of what they call a safety orange paint that I had picked up at my local dollar store a couple of years ago, and I decided to try that out on this project. And I used one of those HVLP guns that I got at Harbor Freight, God, years ago, and I've been using it ever since. It's one of those ones that goes on sale for $19.99 that comes with a regulator, and that works pretty good. I tried one of those $9.99 ones, but that one really stunk and was not a good gun. It just took a couple of minutes to spray on 2 coats of this paint. And actually, I'm really surprised how nice it went on and how well it covered for just being something from the dollar store. But you never know. At the dollar store that I have, they buy some real high-quality industrial closeouts. And they buy like the old paints that have chemicals that you can't use anymore. So sometimes you get lucky. So here it is, all sprayed up, a industrial safety orange. Then I just let it sit overnight to harden good. And then I decided to go back the next day and put some UHMW strips on it so the paint wouldn't scrape off of it where it picks up. I get that stuff at Woodcraft, and I like to use it wherever 2 surfaces rub together. So it's just a matter of cut a couple strips of it. Then it has a peel-off backing, which there's no way to really glue UHMW, so you have to get this kind of stuff to have it be self-adhesive. So I just put a strip on each side in the areas where we were going to be picking up under the motor mounting plates, just so that the paint doesn't come off and things don't rust later. So now it's about time to give it its first try out to see how it does at lifting the motor off the unit. So basically, you just roll it over, you slide it under, push it in place. Those 2 angles go out around the motor brackets that I put on there. Then you crank the trailer jack, and I was surprised just how easy it goes up. Basically, it's maybe a half a pound worth of force to get it to go up. I mean, it does take quite a few cranks to get it up in the air, but it really, you don't have to pick anything up anymore. It makes it a super easy job to just slide it in place, crank it up, and then roll it out of the way. Yeah, I was kind of surprised how nice it works. About the only thing that I don't like about it is that UHMW tape is quite slippery. So if you go to grab onto the handle on the blower assembly, it could slide off. So I'm going to fix that later. But here you can see what I'm talking about, this Cyclone Rake on the quality issues. If you look, this thing's only been used a couple of times, and the paint's already being worn off where the bumpers from the bag hit the frame here. And then where the motor sits on top of it, there's some welds sticking down that also are scraping the paint powder coat off of the front and back areas of it. And I mean, it's something that you could avoid if you put a little bit of effort into it. But this really is going to just be rusty areas that are going to rust out later. And I think it's a real poor quality job that Cyclone Rake did at designing this. So, as you can see, it really does a good job at lifting the motor, and I just wanted to warn anybody that was going to buy one of these 10 horsepower units, just that this motor and blower assembly actually is more than one person should be lifting, and you may want to come up, either get a second person to help you or come up with something else to help you pick it up like this. Then I went back to the plasma table, and I decided to cut one last bracket to help me kind of lock the lock that blower onto the assembly. So I cut the bracket, then I went back over to my little Harbor Freight brake, and I had to put a couple bends in it. And it's just basically going to be a little safety bracket that you drop in place when you engage the lift that will keep it all tightly married together. And next thing I did is I threw a quick coat of spray paint on it. And here you can see what it looks like. And it's just a simple matter of once you get the blower engaged, just drop it on top of the jack there, and it drops down and it locks behind the handle that Cyclone Rake put on the motor there, and it keeps everything tied solidly together so you can actually drag it around just using the blower handle like that, and you don't have to worry about anything coming loose. It's just another view of the bracket dropped in place. And it's just a matter of picking it off of there. Nothing to lock it or anything. It just uses gravity. Then I went back and I put a couple 2x4s on the wall of my pole barn, and I hung the brackets for the Cyclone Rake. And I had to put a little strap around the bottom, a couple hooks and a strap because the bag didn't want to stay collapsed. So I used that to kind of hold everything collapsed tightly. And then it's just a simple matter of rolling the blower assembly around to get it out of the way on this, which really helps, and there's no more heavy lifting to do to assemble the unit. Now, there's probably 100 different ways that you could make a little lift like this to get the motor on and off and move it around, but this is just kind of an idea that I wanted to share with you, showing you what I was able to make with junk and spare parts that I had laying around. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.